All right, I'm gonna get started because I know everyone's on lunch hour and give you some time to ask questions and to also eat while we do this. Just an introduction. My name is Tianna Bell. I am the Director of Finance and Administration for the Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research. I have my background is in finance. That's my undergrad. I did bachelor's of business administration and finance, and I also have a master's of public administration and master's of business administration as well. Ultimately, I've always loved finance. It's something I've always been very passionate about. I think it's really important that people know about how to manage their finances, how to invest their money, those types of things. You will be so much further ahead in your life if you understand money. That being said, feel free to ask me questions, interrupt me throughout. I also have some time for questions at the end. Presentation will probably be about 20 or 30 minutes, so I'm happy to answer any questions along the way or at the end. When it comes down to it, I talked about why should we care about money? Why do I have to care? Unfortunately, for better or worse, we live in a society that's really driven by money. Shelter, food, any other necessities, they all cost money, right? If you want to eat, if you want a place to sleep, you need money to pay for those things. You don't have to partake in consumerism, but it's really important to create a safety net to ensure your needs are met. There's always those basic needs that we try to meet for most people. That doesn't mean you have to buy into, with social media now, advertising is so prevalent. It doesn't mean you have to save for those things and try to, live like the Joneses is what the how the saying goes. But you do want to make sure that your basic needs are met and that you can live a fulfilling life. And you want to know where your money goes and you want to know how to make it work for you. You will be so much farther ahead than other people if you just understand how money works and how to make it grow. I just want to say the information in these slides are from sources on the internet and then my own personal experience with managing my own money and, I've taught personal finance, that kind of thing. You ultimately need to do your budgeting is pretty straightforward, but when it comes to investing and things like that, you really do have to do your own research to make sure you are pursuing a path that makes sense for you. So the first thing we want to talk about is budgeting because ultimately that's where everything starts. That's how you know you have enough money coming in to cover your expenses. It gives your money a purpose. So it helps pay for rent or a mortgage. It makes sure you have enough money for groceries. Ideally, you have some money for savings, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Depending where you are in your life, you may have less for savings. Um, Ideally, you want income greater than your fixed expenses, fixed and variable, your necessities, your grocery, your rent, because that means you have some money to put aside to save or to have, do some of those fun things that make life a little bit more exciting. At the very least, you want income equal to expenses. If your income is less than expenses, I mean, 1 month isn't going to, hurt you too much. But if it's a continuous cycle, the only way to make up that shortfall between your income and expenses is debt. And that can be very scary, especially depending where that debt's coming from. If it's credit card, the interest rate's 20%. That's a huge amount to try to pay back. And even more so if it's consumer debt, if it's not necessities. So you really want to look at needs versus wants when you're budgeting, and I think needs and wants change, right? So, a need, we're thinking rent or mortgage, depending on, what stage you're at, food. But again, we can make good choices with food. We don't always have to have all the snacks. You can make sure you're planning your meals out and being smart with your grocery shopping. I would say a need these days is internet, especially as a student. I think it would be very difficult to get through without internet. But again, you can shop around and try to find the, especially as a student, so many student deals out there to take advantage of. So, um, really looking at what your needs are versus what your wants are. And we'll talk about debt in a later slide. I said that consumer debt, definitely not great, but there is some debt that's unavoidable in our lives, like student loans and mortgage debt. So just looking at how do we even create a budget? Okay, so we've kind of talked about needs and wants. How do we even go about making a plan for our money? I think the easiest way and the way I actually budget my money is zero-based budgeting. So what this does is it gives each dollar of income a purpose, including savings. So I have a little bit of the infographic there to just help you understand how that works. You can buy a budgeting app. I've always used Excel and it has always worked really well for me. What I personally do is I look at my income and then I look at like fixed expenses, and I also allocate money to things like groceries, those variable expenses, just so I kind of know what's left over at the end of the month. And then some goes into savings, some is like fun spending money. So yeah, so again, you're going to create your expense categories. So again, you need to look at needs and wants and then savings. This is a great way to see if you have, income that is sufficient to support your expenses. You need to be realistic. However, the best way to be realistic is look what you actually spent for the last few months, on things like gas, on groceries. And you need to look at things like eating out and that too. Like if that's something that you need in your budget, like for example, you're a busy student and there are going to be 2 to 3 times a week where you're not going to have time to make yourself something and you want to work that into your budget that you need to eat out, then you need to be realistic about working that in your budget. Of course, it's a different conversation. If you can't afford to eat out, you may have to actually bring a sandwich or something to campus. But again, be realistic about what you spend your money on. And then look at if there's any areas where you want to cut down. Sometimes it will absolutely shock you how much money you spend on the eating out, the coffees, right? Especially having a Starbucks on campus doesn't help. Those really expensive budget busters, I will call them. They can really suck your money up. And because it seems like a small amount each time, you don't realize how much it's adding up. And then you want to monitor. Your budget may change, it may need to evolve. So you just need to monitor. And again, make sure you're meeting your goals. If your goal is to save $200 a month, see how you can do that. You may have to cut some things, you may have to live a bit more frugally, but it may pay off to pursue those goals. Your budget needs to cover, your essential expenses. We talked a little bit about this. So your rent, mortgage, groceries, utilities, if it's not included, personal hygiene and health, income earning expenses. So for example, you drive for Uber Eats or something like that. You have to make sure that you're able to keep up with your transport to perform that job. Taxes, if you have to pay taxes, at the end of the year, well, at the end of April. And then if you do have any debt, make sure you're able to at least make the minimum payment on all debts. And we'll talk a bit about that in another slide. Here are some easy areas to save money. Bank fees, using low fee or no fee services. There's Simply or Wealthsimple. As students, again, take advantage of discounts. Try, paying $15 or $20 a month for a bank account is actually borderline ridiculous, in my opinion, when we have access to so many other options. So definitely look into that. Food delivery. I am shocked sometimes. I usually never order food delivery because I am so shocked at what the cost is, by the time you tip and the service fees And usually the food is more expensive on like Skip the Dishes and Uber Eats and those type of apps. Eating it is almost always cheaper. And it's okay to splurge every once in a while. If you're really wanting, a better meal, it's okay to spend the money there. You'll probably still be saving money not using food delivery. Comparison shop. So for everything from food to textbooks to internet, you can, there are multiple companies that offer the textbooks a little harder, but you can buy used textbooks potentially. So always comparison shop to try to find the best deals, buy used, take advantage of university offered services if you can, if you live in a spot that allows that, like transit. And the gym is great. If you like working out, there's no reason to have a membership outside of the university gym. You're getting it included in your student fees. Again, those are areas to take your expenses down. The other thing you can do in a budget, if you're feeling a little bit tight, is an income booster. And for students, applying for scholarships is a great way to do that. We always have workshops that our funding team puts on that will help you increase your chances of success. And just make sure you don't miss those deadlines. It's even if you don't think as long as you meet the eligibility criteria, you should be applying for every single scholarship you are qualified for, because there is no reason not to go after that money. Again, depending on what your work is at currently, there's TAs and RA-ships that you can also pursue to help boost your income by working on campus. Your budget will evolve with you. Right now, your student, things are going to be a little bit tight, and that's okay. But it's good to start practicing these behaviors now. The more you practice them and the more you get used to having a budget, the easier it is when you start to get money. You will have the discipline to carry out and to meet your financial goals. Getting married, having kids, all those things are going to have an impact on your budget and you're going to have to adjust. Savings is a great thing to build in your budget. Again, as I note below, there's going to be times where that's really difficult to do, especially as a student. I get it. I've been there. It is tough, especially if you're not working full time and you're just trying to, kind of scrape by paying tuition and your living costs. But you try to build in even $10 worth of savings is better than nothing. I know people say, well, that's not very much, but whatever, that's $120 at the end of the year. And then you go after graduation, you get a better job, all of a sudden you can save $300 a month. You already know you're able to save because you've shown the behavior that you can save and you've built it in your budget. Well, now you just increase that, right? And you're going to be so much farther ahead just doing these things. So a little bit about debt, because it's so common to have some form of debt. It just, unfortunately, today in this day and age, almost everyone will have some form of debt in their life. So we talk about good debt versus bad debt. So good debt, a mortgage, it's backed by an asset. You have a house. I would say mortgages are good as long as you are planning to live in a place for a significant amount of time. If you are planning to buy and sell within a year or two, a mortgage is not what you want to be pursuing. Rent almost always makes more sense because you can potentially lose a lot of money just even through lawyers' fees. If your house doesn't appreciate in value, sometimes houses depreciate in value. So you want to be careful when you take on a mortgage. Student loan, I mean, you're investing in yourself. That's a fantastic thing to do. Again, as long as you're putting in the work at school and you're being successful, student loans are a fantastic thing to help increase your income earning potential. On this picture, it has small business loans, and I put a question mark over that Just because I think people need to be really careful about loans for small businesses. Being an entrepreneur is great, but it also comes with a lot of risk, and it can cause financial ruin for some people. Like it can really create a lot of hardship. So you need to be very careful if you're pursuing that. I'm not sure that's always good debt. I know that, obviously building a business can be great reward, but there's also great risks there. Bad debt, so credit card debt, almost never, I shouldn't say almost, it's never worth it, unless you have a way to pay it off really quickly. It's really tough to get ahead once you're in the hole with credit cards just because the interest is so high. And that's where we're looking at income versus expenses. We don't want to be covering that shortfall with credit cards. That's why ideally you have a little bit of savings. And I truly realize that's easier said than done sometimes. Uh, but having a bit of savings helps in those emergency times when you may need it. Your car breaks down, something like that. Having a little bit of cushion, in an emergency savings fund, is really helpful. Payday loans, I think, are even worse than credit cards because they really, again, if you can pay them off right away, but almost it's, very difficult to do. And the interest rate is even worse than a credit card. Really hard to get out of a payday loan cycle. I would try my best to avoid that at all. If at all possible, do not do payday loans. Personal loans, again, they can be good, but it depends what it's for. If you're taking out a personal loan to go on a vacation, bad idea. No one's saying you can't enjoy life and travel, but you should be able to afford that on your income. Not everyone can afford to do all the things all the time. Depending, again, what stage you're at in your life, it may be a year or two down the line before you can do those things. Personal loans, again, it's a better option than a credit card because it generally should have a lower interest rate, but you can still get caught in a cycle of really struggling to pay down that debt if if it gets too high. One thing you can do if you do have a credit card is a really low maximum. So you could just have one, again, for an emergency situation, you need it, or you need it to like book hotel rooms or something. Get a $500 limit. Don't do something like, I know, they'll give you $8,000, $10,000. Majority of people do not need that, especially if you don't have the income to cover those type of expenses. So here a little bit, about debt. So if you have debt, so if you have a line of credit or you have a car loan is really common, or any other type of personal loan, you need to ensure your payment is in your budget because that's now needs to be paid every single month. And you really should pay attention to the interest rate. The higher the interest rate, obviously, the harder it is to pay back the loan. And if you can do it, you need to pay extra on any type of debt that you have. Mortgage, not so much because the interest rate's lower, but I'm talking even student loans would be good, but especially credit cards, line of credit, even car loans can be, 8 or 9%. It makes sense to pay those off a little faster. It reduces the interest you pay and it frees. And again, once you get that loan paid off, that's now extra money that can go to something else. I put this picture here. So if you put $1,000 on a credit card and you just paid the minimum balance, and I mean, credit card companies do this for a reason. They're not in the business of being nice. They want to make money. They're profit making business. If you put $1,000 on and you just paid the minimum balance, it would take you almost 11 years to pay that off. Over a year, you're paying $141 in interest, and over 11 years, you're paying $990 in interest. So almost double what you originally put on your card. So really important to pay attention I know it sounds good to just make the minimum payment. It is almost never a good idea just to make the minimum payment. Again, if you're just trying to get by, yes, at least service your debt, because that's going to affect your credit score if you don't. But ideally, you are putting more than the minimum payment on, or you are going to be stuck with the debt for a very long time, especially if the interest rate is higher. So yeah, so now moving into some more fun stuff. Debt's not really fun. It's a fact of life sometimes, but I find investing probably the most fun thing you can do with money, other than buy yourself some cool things. But right now, as a student, I think it's wonderful. Like you're investing in yourself. So even if you don't have a lot of money to put aside for savings or investing, you are investing in yourself. You're going to get a better job after you're done school, and it will help you achieve financial independence in the future, which is wonderful. And again, it may not be where you're at currently, but there will come a time when you can take your extra money, invest it, and take advantage of employer retirement plans if you don't, again, if you're not there yet. Time is really your best friend when it comes to investing and making your money grow. So again, like I said, that 100 and say you can only put $10 away a month, it is something, and you would be amazed at how much it can grow just by investing it and gaining a little bit of interest. So why do we even have to invest? Why can't I just keep my money in my bank account and I save it? And the reason is inflation. So inflation, if you don't know, you will see it all around you, but it's just the natural increase in the price of goods. Um, Prices just rise over time, right? The cost of houses has risen over time. Vehicles, utility prices, everything rises over time. Some of the positives of that, your paycheck might be a little bit bigger because you will generally make more so that you can live. It can, help the economy may be growing. Some negatives are higher expenses. Too much inflation is not good, which is why we see interest rates change. The Bank of Canada adjusts interest rates, a little bit of economics there. And it can be bad for lenders. But they noted the fun fact there's a Big Mac index that tracks the price of Big Macs all around the world to see what inflation is doing. So essentially, like if you collect no interest or your money doesn't grow in stock markets, so either in a high interest savings account or you've actually invested your money, you are actually losing money every single year because your dollar will not go as far the next year due to inflation. So say, we're using the Big Mac. You had $10 saved, and this year that bought two Big Macs, but then the price increased next year. You didn't invest your money. Now Big Macs are $10.50 for two. Now you can no longer afford two Big Macs. Whereas had you invested that $10, you may have actually been able to afford the two Big Macs because you would have earned interest. Um, so I said one of the biggest things that you want to help your money grow is time. And that just doesn't mean like, again, you leave your money sitting in an account. You need some sort of growth, interest, dividends, that type of thing. So if you look here, this shows $1,000 compounding at 10%. 10%, I would say, is pretty high. Most people are not going to make that necessarily consistently every single year because things go up and down. So take this for what it's worth, but it illustrates the example that if I have $1,000 and I leave it in for 70 years at 10%, I'm going to have $789,000. So when I say like $10, $20 can make a difference, it absolutely can. You just have to allow interest and growth to take over for you. And what compound interest means is you've earned money. So say you've earned $10 the first year, you leave that $10 in there. So now you have $1,010. And now you're earning interest on not just $1,000, but $1,010. And that keeps on repeating until your money grows bigger up until, you need to pull it out or you retire. Before you invest, and again, I realize people may not be at the point of investing, but I think it's really important to know about investing and how to understand when the time comes what you can invest in, what makes sense. Even if you have an employer-sponsored pension plan, at the university, I can look what mine's invested in, and I can choose to take on more risk because I know I have a longer time horizon before I retire, that kind of thing. So it's really important, in my opinion, to understand how to invest your money, because this is what makes your money grow and will help you, again, be able to retire, be able to take care of your family, yourself, those types of things. So we can send out this PowerPoint after, but I have a URL here to information about risk levels. So it just allows you to look at, what level of risk can you take on when you're investing. So if you need the money right away, like say you want to buy a house in a year, you have almost no risk. You can take almost very little risk with your money because you do not want to lose that money you needed in a year. Whereas, like I said, the retirement, if you have a long time horizon, you can take on a bit more risk, but you also want to make sure you're okay with that. Like if your money drops, are you going to panic? Your risk level is a little bit lower. If you're okay with watching things drop, knowing that, markets bounce back and things, will continue to grow in the long term, your risk level is a little bit higher. So, so those are the main questions to ask yourself. When do you need the money? And then again, how comfortable are you with seeing investments going up and down? Because there is always fluctuations when the stock market is involved. One way to invest your money, if you're not comfortable with stock market and it's just not where you want to be, there's high interest savings accounts, which are great. Your money is protected, but you do earn a higher interest rate than a normal checking and savings account, which some of them offer next to nothing. You get practically nothing. Some great ones. So there's Simple Cash account that provides 2.75% interest. And if you spend on there, it's like a debit credit card. You get 1% back on spending. Oh, pardon me. Tangerine and EQ Bank are also popular for high interest savings accounts. And then I also, again, put a link to other ones. There's a chart that shows the highest ones, but if you just want to park some money, make a little bit of interest, try to, again, beat inflation, lots of options to do that in a really safe way. Even if you have tuition money that you've been saving, great place to park it is a high interest savings account until you need it. At least you're earning a little bit of money on it until you have to, pay it off to the university. Briefly talk about some other accounts. So a high interest savings account, you're actually putting money in. These 4 accounts, you have to do something with. Like you could just put cash in them, but nothing's going to happen with that cash. You need to invest in something. You can also put high interest accounts in, I believe, in the TFSA and the RRSP. Not sure about the other two. But a TFSA is a tax-free savings account. This one allows your money to grow, just like it says, tax-free. There are limits of how much you can put into it, but any growth you experience upon pulling that money out, you do not have to pay any taxes on it. So that's really nice. One of the greatest accounts you can have when you first start investing is the TFSA. So I highly suggest you look into it. Really easy to open. And again, you don't need to go to a bank to do it. There are self-serve brokerages like Wealthsimple and Questrade that make it really easy to open it yourself. A registered retirement savings plan. This is a deferred tax investment. So you put your money in here, you get to claim that amount off your income, off your taxes. But once you pull out money out of your RSP when you are retirement age, you do pay taxes on the money. The idea is that you will be in a lower income tax bracket once you pull that money out. RESP, this is if you have kids, government matches some of the money that you put in there, and a really great idea if you have kids, because it can really boost the savings for them. So they don't have to take out as much student loans when they get older. And then there's also a registered disability savings plan. If you have a disability, that can be an option for you. I don't want to get too far into these, but I just want to highlight that they're available, they're options, and they're vehicles. Lots of people think, again, you can just put money into them and something will happen, and it doesn't. But I'm going to touch a little bit about investing. I'm not going to tell you what to invest in, but I do want to let you know that it's so much easier than people think it is. I think people think the stock market and they get really overwhelmed and that they could never be successful investing for themselves and they have to pay someone to do it. It's truly so easy now that it's almost foolproof. So stocks, bonds, and ETFs. So an ETF is an exchange traded fund. I'll talk a little bit more about those, but all these investments provide exposure to the market. When I say market, I mean stock market, companies. Bonds are generally seen as a safer investment. They're really good to have in a portfolio because they can protect against swings in the market. They're a little bit more stable, but because they're more stable, they provide a lower return. As with everything in the stock market, more risk can potentially mean more return, but it also means more risk. So you have a chance of losing money. I do not gamble when I invest. I think some people truly gamble, and sometimes it does pay off and you'll get great returns, but lots of times it doesn't, and people will lose large sums of money. I am always a safe investor and I still get great returns. But I'm always picking things that make sense. Like I will personally probably, at least not anytime soon, invest in crypto because I don't fully understand it. I don't know the purpose of it. Other people have invested in it and made lots of money. That's fantastic. I just kind of stick to what I know. So blue chip stocks, things like banks, even tech has been fairly stable, but tech is also riskier. So think Tesla, Apple, those types of things can be riskier because they are only as good as their last product and what they're able to innovate. So as soon as they can't innovate anymore, they're no longer going to be valuable to people. So I'm also very cautious about tech. The difficulty with trying to build a portfolio with just stocks and bonds is most investors don't start out with enough funds to create a diversified portfolio. And diversification means that you are not just invested in, say, the Royal Bank. There is nothing to protect you from the Royal Bank stock changing. You want to have multiple businesses in your portfolio. And it's also really time consuming to figure out which stocks are a good buy. And some people will say they are, and some people will say they're not. I think everyone can invest for themselves using ETFs. All an ETF does is it tracks what's called an index. So it could track, so we think of ones like S&P 500. That's a US index. It's the 500 largest companies in the US. So you can find an ETF that tracks all those companies without investing individually in those companies. You can find ones that track the 60 largest companies in Canada. You can find ones that track companies across the world. There are so many now that it's actually almost overwhelming. So you kind of just have to, again, keep to the core of what you're trying to do. There's a couple companies, there's Vanguard and BlackRock that do ETFs. They all have fact sheets that are wonderful. You just have to make sure, again, your ETFs, it'll show you what they're holding, what companies they're invested in. You don't want to have ones that are all holding Apple because then your exposure is really high to say Apple. I don't put mutual funds on here because I think they are a money grab. They almost never outperform the market. And the market as a whole, I say is like if we tracked every stock, mutual funds usually never outperform. And they have really high fees called management expense ratios. So I always stay away from mutual funds. I don't think they are worth it. If you're interested in starting to invest, the Canadian couch potato form of investing is fantastic. Um, they have all-in-one ETFs that you can look, and it's not their ETFs, they are just from other companies. They have portfolios. Like for my RSP, I'm invested in one ETF. I make it as easy as possible for myself. That's all I do. I buy it and I forget it. So again, you'll have that link, but it's a really easy way to invest for yourself if you're interested in starting to do that. All right. And with that, I'm going to open it up to any questions if anyone. Yeah, Amir.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. I just have a quick question. I did not quite understand what did you mean by the fact that if you put money in the TFSA or RSEP, it doesn't do anything. I didn't understand that part. Like if you put money in it, what should we do afterwards?
Yeah. So I think because that's a common misconception. So if you open up we'll say like a TFSA either through a bank or through an online broker and you put money into it, it will go into the TFSA. We'll just use TFSA as example, but you actually have to invest it into something. You have to do something with the money to help it grow. So another one, so you could invest it in like a GIC. So that's a guaranteed investment certificate. That means it guarantees you say 2% interest if you leave your money in it for a
Hmm.
year. Or you buy an ETF or a stock or a bond. So you have to actually purchase something to get money back. Or to I guess not get money back, but to get your money to grow within those investment vehicles.
So just to follow up, is it possible to do multiple things when we have money in the TFSA?
Absolutely. Yes, you can have a mix of anything as long as it's allowed within the TFSA. And a lot of things are. TFSAs are not for day trading or things like that. Like if that's what people are interested, it's not for that. It's truly about
Long
investing and
term.
making your money grow. But yes, you could have a combination of GIC, of ETF. You could buy a single stock. You could buy one bond. You can mix anything you want in there. And you can actually have multiple TFSAs open. You can have your own open. You can have one with a bank open as long as you don't go over the maximum limit of what you're
Yeah, that
allowed
was
to invest in it.
Yeah, that was my next question. Is it like is it possible to have multiple TFSAs and for example, if you have one in a bank and one in an online brokerage, like is it good to have like that diverse accounts?
Again, it depends what you're investing in.
Hmm.
It can again be difficult to track with multiple ones, but if there's something at a bank you want, like say, like I know TD has their own series of funds and stuff like that. And if you're really interested in those, maybe you do want to have a TFSA with TD, but you're also interested in trying to invest on your own a little bit. So you open a TFSA with an
Hmm.
online brokerage. It really just depends what your goals are with it.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Uh, okay, just a question here. Do you have suggestions for budgeting and planning ahead when you have inconsistent income? Of course, as a student, that is definitely what lots of people are dealing with because you're sometimes putting things together, scholarships, TA money. Um, so things can fluctuate. So just how to make an effective budget plan when you're balancing multiple streams of income, when some are guaranteed and some, can be canceled last minute. That is a challenge. What I would do in that case, I would make a list of my expenses that I can't go without. So that's your rent, that's bare minimum of groceries. Like, again, we don't always want you just eating ramen, but like what you can reasonably get by for groceries. If you have to cut, you can cut, but hopefully, a reasonable amount for groceries, things like internet, anything that you have to pay. I would say, if you really have to, you could live without TV and stuff like that. But so I would do that first. And then I would at least then you know what you have to cover. And then you can look at the multiple sources of income and see how they cover that. And I know like I budget personally on a monthly basis. So I save money from my last, so for example, I save this month's paychecks, like my September paychecks will go to pay October's expenses. And some people don't operate like that. Sometimes people operate every 2 weeks. I know in these 2 weeks, I have to pay my car payment and my rent or half my rent or something like that. And they budget that way. I budget like kind of a month in advance. And I truly understand that's a bit of a privileged position to be coming from, but that's just how I'm able to set it up. And that works for my brain. So then I put in my income, I know my expenses, and I have what I call my holding account that I keep that money in until I pay those expenses. And I actually, every time I've paid one of those expenses, I mark paid on my Excel spreadsheet. And I do that every single month to keep track of what I've paid. Um, if you're finding that like those inconsistent income streams, again, are not covering those expenses, that's where it gets difficult. I would again just make sure you know your expenses. That's the best part to start with. If one month you make a little bit more, I would put that away for the next month when maybe that income, the income changes a little bit. Maybe, the TA ship ended or you only received the scholarship for a month. Or if you know for an entire semester that in total you are going to make $10,000 between scholarships and TAs and whatever else. Again, it's hard because expenses are due and the income may come in variable ways, but if you're being paid relatively consistently, you could operate on the assumption that you're getting $2,500 a month. So that's another way to do it. Again, that would depend when the income's coming in, if that works. Like if the income all coming in at the end of December, but your rent is due every single, month until then, that way doesn't work. But that's another way you could do it is, split the income over 4 months, even though one month you might be making 4,000, the next year only making 1,000. But yes, having variable income, people, with different streams of income or you operate on commission, that is a challenge. But knowing your expenses and what you have to cover is half the battle and will kind of allow you to ride those low points and the high points. And when you're at a high point, try to put away a little bit for those low points. And then there was a question about will the slides be shared? And yes, we can email out the slides to everyone so you have it. Any other questions? Yeah, I see Laura made a comment, with rent, you could talk to your landlord and try to, arrange to pay rent for the entire semester because that's when the money was received. So then that money's gone, you're not spending it elsewhere. Amir.
Yeah, sorry, I have another question.
Yeah.
I was thinking, what is your opinion about online platforms that allow you to invest? I've seen so many different opinions online. Some people say, oh, they're great. Some people say most of them are scammy because when you have to pull your money out, you have to pay like a huge chunk of your earnings back to the platform. So I was thinking like comparison with the banks, like from your personal experience, which one do you think is more wiser to pay attention to?
Yeah, I think I don't think I've ever actually had an investment account with a bank. So I'll say that. So I don't know what their costs are. I have had one with a financial advisor, and I do know that what they wanted $75 for every time I did an ETF trade. Now it's probably changed since then. That's when they were new, but that was a lot of money, especially when you think about how much you have to make to just pay a $75 fee. But I've used Questrade since, I mean, I've probably used Questrade for 15 years now, I want to say. I've had accounts open with them. And actually, because there's more competition in the market, like Wealthsimple is also another really good one if people want to use it. I have accounts at Wealthsimple. Like I keep now lots of my money in Wealthsimple because I get the interest every single month on my money while it's sitting there before I use it for bills and things. But yes, I've had like a TFSA and an RESP because I have kids, and an RRSP at Questrade for quite a long time. And there are actually no fees on ETFs. So I can trade them. So I can buy them, I can sell them without any fees attached. And I believe Wealthsimple is the same. And I can pull that money out. Now, I can pull the money out of my TFSA, no problem. It does not cost me anything. If you pull out money out of an RSP before you are retirement age, that will cost you money. So, but it's not Questrade or Wealthsimple or another online brokerage charging you that money. It's the government. The government takes, I think there's a withholding fee or withholding tax they take. And then they also make you pay taxes on the money. So say you earned $30,000 in the year and you took 20,000 from an RSP, you are going to get charged income tax on that 20,000 plus I believe another penalty on top of that. So that's a caveat. But no, there's no fees involved. I think even on stocks, like if you were interested, again, I don't actually buy individual stocks. I don't think I ever have. But I don't think there's fees on those either. So yeah, I would say like again, you have to do a bit of your own research, but there is so much out there now. It's so easy to invest for yourself that, and with no fees and low fees on, these ETFs, it really does not make sense to pay someone to manage your money because you can almost do better, do just as good as they can.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I
You're
have one
welcome.
last question. Sorry to take everybody's
No, I
time.
love it. I like
Um,
questions.
I was thinking, like most international students, like they don't have that flexibility that Canadian citizens have because, well, they're international students.
Yes.
And I was thinking, for students who are here for long term, for example, grad students who have like projects that span multiple years, do you think it's wise to invest in like a GIC or an ETF from a Canadian institute, or it's better to like you said, do it online so we're not bound to the geographical position?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, again, if you're doing a GIC, I would line up the length of the GIC with your schooling so that you're out of it by the time you're done, in case you don't stay, right? I think lots of students do try to stay in Canada, but just in case you do go home, at least then you have access to your money. Again, you can always, like an RRSP is different. I don't even know, you probably have to, I'm guessing you have to be a permanent resident to do the RRSP. Maybe
Yes,
I
that's
should look.
true. Yeah, for the
Yeah, I was gonna say
education,
I
for
should have looked into that, so I
retirement.
apologize.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think it hurts to invest here as long as you can get the money out if you end up not staying in Canada.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions?